From the Legomicus Studios, it's Legomicus Elections. We want to take a minute to update our ratings of the governor's races today. So, of course, earlier this week, we had some primaries in states like Iowa, where there was an upset in Iowa. We will talk about that race, and indeed all of them. We're going to put a map on the screen here in just a second. There it is. We're going to talk about the ratings for all of these states, all of the governor's races. So if a state's blacked out, there's no governor's race there this year. We're not going to get into detail in every state, but we are going to talk about a few states which do have different rankings than the last time that we updated this. So this is a blank map, and now we're going to fill in the states that are safe. So the states that are dark blue are safe Democratic races. The states that are dark red are safe Republicans. So California right now, that is a state where the counting is ongoing. It looks like Xavier Becerra is going to be in the general election as a Democrat. I remember a few months ago, there was some panicking based off of the polls. You had the two Republican candidates at like 18 and 17%, and some Democrats were freaking out in California like, oh my God, we're going to get locked out. Well, Swalwell dropped out. That is not going to happen. I really don't think Becerra is going to get caught. And even if he does, it will be by Steyer, not by Chad Bianco. So the Democrats are going to have a candidate in that general election. They're not going to get locked out. Honestly, Steve Hilton, the Republican, might be the one who has to worry about getting locked out, because as these mail votes are coming in, it's getting more Democratic. So I think Becerra will be fine. There will be a Democrat in that race one way or another. The Republicans are not going to flip California. I think we all should probably understand that at this point. So let's move on now to the states that are likely. So we've got Texas as likely Republican right now. I do want to see more polling out of that governor's race. It does look like the Senate race is going to be very competitive. We actually today have the Senate race as a toss-up, but that is for another video, so definitely subscribe so you can find out when we talk about that. But for right now, I have the Texas governor's race as likely Republican. There has been some polling suggesting it might be competitive-ish, and if that continues, then we'll probably move it to lean. The governor's race in Florida, the same thing. I would like to see some more independent polling. That would suggest something that's closer for us to be able to move that. And then, you've got Minnesota governor, which we have as likely Democratic at this point. New York governor, I only have as likely Democratic because Kathy Hochul, as we have said, is not the most popular governor that New York has ever had. I think that goes without saying. But it's still New York. It's still a pretty blue state. So, we'll humor ourselves for a little while longer. Just keep that as likely. And we also have Pennsylvania as likely Democratic. It looks like Josh Shapiro is well ahead in the polls of Stacey Garrity. So we'll see how the race continues. But at this point, I'm not really seeing any signs that Garrity is mounting a competitive race there in Pennsylvania, so likely Democratic. So now let's do them one at a time. We're going to do the lean Republican states. So we have New Hampshire there. New Hampshire could, I think, at some point move to likely Republican. I'm not sure the Democrats are really putting up much of a fight against Kelly Ayotte at this juncture. And frankly, I think if they had to be concerned about a statewide race in New Hampshire, I think they'd much rather win the Senate race at this point, which is open. And then Kansas, this would be a flip to the Republicans. We've had it there for a while. The Democrats it's kind of like in Massachusetts where sometimes Republicans will be very competitive and win elections there. It's the same thing in Kansas where Democrats can sometimes be competitive. But you have a two-term Democrat, Laura Kelly, who is leaving. So right now, I think the Republicans flip it back. I haven't seen much polling there at all. But you would think that this would be a lean Republican flip. And now on the lean Democratic side, you've got Maine there and you've got Arizona. I feel like Katie Hobbs is going into this general election in Arizona in pretty good shape. As for Maine, the primary is coming. The primary is actually coming next week. So we will find out who the Democratic nominee will be there. I do think whomever the Democratic nominee will be is going to be favored. Republicans haven't had a whole lot of success outside of Paul LePage, who was winning over a decade ago, and Susan Collins. And I think Republicans will do everything they can to try to get Susan Collins back over the finish line in 2026. So those are your two lean Democrats. As for tilt Republican, this should be interesting to a few of you. We've got Alaska and we've got Nevada. Nevada, I do think Joe Lombardo is just very, very slightly favored. I think it's going to be a tough race for him. I think Aaron Ford out in Nevada, the Democratic Attorney General, is going to be a tough opponent for him. But, I mean, Nevada's just a very, very light red state, probably at this point. So we'll have to continue to follow that. Haven't seen a lot of polling on that one either. But right now, I would give Lombardo the slightest edge. And actually, there has been very little polling in Alaska. But what I've seen has actually not been too bad for the Democrats. So they do have Tom Begich as the Democratic candidate. Of course, Alaska has a very unique system where they've got the top four and then the ranked choice and all that. But so far, I mean, the numbers haven't been awful for the Democrat, Tom Begich. So I would still think at the end of the day, a Republican probably wins, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So I think tilt Republican is kind of where my mind space is at this point. There have been other outfits that have it as likely Republican or safe Republican. I'm not there at all. That is not really what the polling suggests that this is going to be. So keep an eye on it, because Alaska might actually be very surprising this year in a couple of races. So now tilt Democratic. We actually are lighting up a few races here. The first one I will talk about is Michigan. This is one where it was going to be a 3-candidate race. And the last time we evaluated this, it was really hard to get a read on it because you had Mike Duggan, the independent, who was siphoning votes away, but he started collapsing in the polls. He actually dropped out. And now this is pretty much a straight-on Republican versus Democratic competition. You've got what looks like is going to be a race between Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State, and Congressman John James. I would think, just given the political environment that seems to be brewing this year, that this one is going to tilt towards the Democrats, and I would imagine Jocelyn Benson winning that primary. But I'm not discounting the possibility that this could end up being a close race at the end of the day. So tilt Democratic on that one. And now Iowa. Iowa was a toss-up. We have moved Iowa to tilt Democratic. So in the June 2nd primary for governor in Iowa, there was an upset. I think a lot of people just kind of assumed that Congressman Randy Feenstra was going to win the Republican primary. But Zach Lane, a conservative businessman, he had support from the Maha movement. He came on stronger towards the end, and he ended up upsetting Feenstra in that GOP primary for governor. Rob Sand is, I believe, the only Democrat who is elected statewide at this point. He's the state auditor. He was unopposed. I actually think Sand should be the slight favorite at this point. I think Sand caught a big break with Feenstra losing that primary. Now, you could also make the argument, well, look, Feenstra was starting to lose steam towards the end of the campaign. He was fading down the stretch. So who is to say, even if he won the nomination, that he would have gotten a second win and won just because it's Iowa? You can make that argument. I think Sand was going to be a strong candidate either way. But I think now that you have more of a right-wing outsider who doesn't have electoral experience behind him in that nominee spot against a stronger candidate like Sand, I think the race actually does start to favor Sand now. Whereas it was a toss-up before. It would have, if Feenstra had won the primary, we would have kept it at toss-up, but now I think that this one actually favors Sand. So this could always move back to toss-up or wherever, but right now I think I would probably pick Sand to win if you made me pick today. And then we have 3 toss-ups. You've got Georgia. Ohio, and Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, let's see who gets out of that primary. I think the Republican is going to be Tom Tiffany, who is a congressman. In Ohio, you've got Amy Acton, the Democrat, versus Vivek Ramaswamy, the Republican. Ohio has been a much redder state over the last decade than it had been before, but Vivek's poll numbers are not that great. Amy Acton is hanging right with him. Actually, in some polls, has been a little bit ahead of him. So I think toss-up is a good spot for that race. I also think so with Georgia. So we still have to find out who's going to win that Republican runoff for governor in Georgia. But Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former Atlanta mayor, she is the Democratic nominee. And I think at this point, just based on where Georgia is and where Georgia has been, I do think that Bottoms has a shot at winning. So I would like to see more polling, but we're not going to get that until after the runoff. So for now, I do actually think a toss-up is the best place for this. And then after the runoff, we will reevaluate it. So that is how we see the governor's races. Right now in the U.S., primary season is continuing through September, actually, and as these primary results come through, and some states will have runoffs, then we will probably start to get more polling and figure out who is going to be favored in a lot of these races. So definitely stick around at Legomicus Elections, because there's a subscribe button right there. Probably right there. Right there. That's the button you should push, like, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. We'll see you soon.